in the online space today, it seems like everywhere you look, there's always these posts of trauma this, trauma that, like everything sort of seems trauma, but then there's also, there's like a counter movement. There's also people pushing it back against it, saying everything is being called trauma. Is everything really trauma? What do you think trauma is?
Oh, that's a very good question. And it's, of course, as you say, it's a kind of a definition. So it's what you find in the literature compared to what other people say. And so I will give a detailed answer on what is my opinion about trauma and what is out there in the literature, if you like. So in my opinion, trauma is every negative experience, any experience that has a negative influence on my being and my actions. And also an experience which cannot be completely transformed out of my own resilience. So the resilience and the awareness often plays a big role in trauma. And as you say, some people say I'm trauma, and other people say what there is no trauma. So it's a factor of resilience and also unavailability of perceiving it and seeing it. So you really can't tell. I think, but the influence on being and actions. There are people who had experienced trauma, but they were hiding it so deep in the subconscious mind that they are not even aware of trauma. And with the other thing, with the transgenerational trauma, this is a kind of new field where people would, like 30 years ago would say, why should the trauma my grandparents experienced influence me and my actions? And with the new research field of epigenetics, it became much clearer that there is also an influence over generations, so the inheritance of trauma. And so I would say that it's a personal, individual thing. And if a person feels traumatized, we should take it serious. And I think that's and if people don't want to, we need the will of the client, of the patient. So it really depends on the individual, if an individual is really feeling a trauma, so that the individual decides what is trauma. So I really break it down to not a definition from a therapist, from a researcher, or from the news, or from any other influencing, but it's really breaking down to the person who is perceiving or feeling the trauma. And if a person feels a trauma by just being misjudged from a parent or a teacher, and this person's nervous costume, the nervous system is reacting traumatic to it, it is a trauma. So it's really depending on the perceiving end of the recipient's side, and it's nothing to do with what really happened, because we are all individuals. So if someone feels traumatized, it's important to take that serious, to really see the individual, because that's what this person needs.
So it's not just what happens to the person. You can't say that somebody. Oh, yeah, I'm saying it's not just what happens, it's what meaning the person makes out of the experience. So, it could be the same thing as two people lose their parents. It can be the exact same way that both of them lose their parents, but the relationship they have with the parent, the different things they had planned with their parents, would play a role in the way they interpret that whole experience. So if it was somebody where they were really close with their parents, they grew up their whole life with their mother, and they were like had all these plans in their mind that they're gonna make life better for their parent or whatever, and then suddenly they get taken away in an accident. It's like that person's whole life gets destroyed, and it's like they don't know how they're gonna cope. Whereas if it's somebody that has absolutely no relationship with their parents and the same scenario happens, it's like, oh, that does not bother me. It doesn't affect me. It's something I can move on from very easily.
Yeah, and that reflects on, yeah, and that's the complexity behind it, that and that needs also individual solutions, because you can't just put a pattern, a therapeutic pattern over that, because it needs to be looked at very individual. That's important, and because the person created by her his own thoughts, by her his own actions, by her his own resilience, created the depth of the trauma, created the importance of the trauma, created the reality, and that what it takes is to get to the level of reality and really take it serious from that very specific person, and connect with the reality the person is was so the awareness that we are perceive our environment completely different, and that would be even just one big step in community lives or social interactions, that we are aware that you perceive something totally different, the same thing, or even in a conversation the recipient decides what he really hears. And so from that point of view, working with traumatized persons, it needs to be on the level of the recipient or the level of the client, and there's nothing that that wasn't important, that wasn't traumatizing. So it's just the decision of the recipient, and that's what it needs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a well-rounded definition. And I think also in terms of dealing with trauma, it makes it very clear that the first step with dealing with trauma is not going in as the expert, where you have a client and you think you know everything about this client. Okay, this is all I've read about in books about trauma, and this is going to be your symptoms, this is going to be the way you take it. There's always going to be that human element that is unique to each person. It's understanding what that trauma is for that person. It's knowing where this person came from, not just in that instance that you are seeing them, because we all carry baggage from before. So the trauma that you may experience from a single event is not just going to be that event. It's all the stories that are at play in your mind up to that point. And, in preparing for the episode, I looked at the therapy that you sort of, your approach to therapy are called Doletiontherapy. Would you mind talking about it? I found it quite interesting.
Yes. So at the beginning, I didn't realize that this is a trauma healing therapy, because I was in putting it together from various techniques I learned. So from core therapy, constellation, systemic therapy, from hypnotherapy, because I was trained in all these kind of psychotherapeutical methods, and I always found it not difficult, but kind of annoying for the patient and me, or the client and me, that it's so problem based. So for example, I was working with height anxiety, for example, or fear of spiders, let's call it like this. Some very specific problem which you can solve by a session or various sessions, where you get into the subconscious mind, into the conscious mind, and just guide your client through that jungle of combinations which led to the fear of spiders, for example. And like half a year later, and we solved that, and it's you know, with the methods out there, it's easily to solve when you are being with a good therapist, when you're open for the therapy, and so on. So, but what I find kind of annoying or disappointing, I would say, is that half a year later, that client might come back with, oh, I have very serious relationship problems with my mother or with my husband or with my whatever. So they're completely different aspect of problem, with a new approach by a new, you know, and since my highest values are freedom and independence, I thought, why not creating a method who is helping all the negativities, all the negative experiences, to really connect with the own, originally their self-healing powers. Because it starts like when we are a baby, or you know, from NLP, I think we hear like about 80,000 no's until we are grown up, that no, you can't do that, no, you can't do it. So all that belief system which was put in ourselves, and plus the trauma which we didn't solve ourselves because we weren't allowed to, or we were kept small for it. All this kind of history created a system of, we need others, we need a doctor, we need all that to really solve that. And I was realizing that when I establish something which is dealing with all the negativities, and I just explain in a second how I do it, because in the first attempt it sounds very maniac or very unachievable, but so it's a solution based thing. When you know the iceberg, where we have the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. So the conscious mind is about the tip of the iceberg, and the subconscious mind is the lower part, the bigger part. I think most of your listeners also have heard about it, and if not, just look it up. So in this iceberg says that the subconscious mind is really guiding us, is really making the decisions, because it's the bigger part, but it's underneath the surface. That's why we use that iceberg model. So, and everything, and the underneath the surface part is kind of getting us into our life and reality. And so, and all these all experiences are stored in that iceberg, in the lower or in the upper part. When it's in the upper part, we can remember. We know that we are kind of mobbed in the. We had a big disease. We had an accident. So we know these kind of things from it's still in our mind, in our conscious mind. Okay.
So what it sounds like, it's where a lot of therapy focuses on a client comes in with a problem, and then it's addressing that specific problem each time and helping them overcome that problem. Your approach seems more geared to empowering the client, the individual, helping them get to, not necessarily just focusing on dealing with problems as they come to them. In that instance, like say it's somebody that goes with the example you gave where it's something happened with their parents and they want to overcome it. It's not just dealing with that problem, but it's empowering the person to be able to deal with other problems that might come along the way, getting them beyond that state where it's, each problem, and then trying to sort of just look at each of it as problem solving, and teaching problem solving to teaching somebody to be able to live with themselves, live with everything, move beyond all of that. And in terms of like looking at the subconscious as well, being in tune with that.
As you said, empowering is the perfect word for it. It's really empowering and reconnecting with all the knowledge, your source of energy, your, in a spiritual way, your higher self, that you're so that you don't need an external guide anymore, but your intuition at the end is the guide, which is getting you along and guiding you and also protecting you, informing you, because most people know already what. So we are all so well educated when it comes to food, when it comes to techniques, when it comes to what to do and how to decide. So the mind does know that, but sometimes the manifesting part is so difficult because we cannot deal with the negativities of the subconscious, or we cannot integrate the so the negativities of the subconscious are kind of holding us back. And so, as you said, when we are letting go those negativities, we are empowered again by ourselves. And so the importance to know about it is that it's just a one big session, and then it's kind of done, because then your intuition, your higher self is kicking in and taking the job of guiding you. So that's that. As I said, independence and freedom, that's what I want to give to my clients, without making them dependent from more and more sessions, more and more, the problem-based approach to a solution-based approach. Because I think life is too important and too short for having solutions which just swallow up hours of sessions, hours of settings, hours of life needs to be lived in a happy and free way. And that's why I'm offering that.
So what might be some of the challenges somebody would encounter, in terms of this approach?
So one challenge is definitely when I talk, I'm on many podcasts, German podcasts or festivals or English seminars where I explain what I do, and you can also see all the details in a much more figurative way on my website if you like. But to answer your question is, some people think that it's not that easy to let go the major problems they have. And there it takes trust and courage to really be willing to let go all that. And some of my listeners are sometimes thinking or fearing that they become a different person because, over a period of 30, 40, 50 years, you constructed a reality including or integrating all the pain, all the sorrow, all the trauma, and which maybe led to unhealthy relationships or unhealthy patterns. And to realize that you, I wouldn't say need to let go of those patterns and relationships, but the fear is that I kind of kick them out of their former life, which isn't true, because it's the former life is the same. It's just like the flow state, the ease, the lightness is increasing. You know what I mean? People are sometimes afraid of letting go the whole construct they lived, and that's why they are not willing to make the deep dive, I would say. So what I offer is a deep dive. It's a really clean up from the tip to the top, from the bottom to the top, and that takes courage. But when you are able, so for whom is that therapy? It's not for acute psychotic or schizophrenic or other acute psychiatric illnesses. Okay, the acute phase you cannot concentrate because you need to be balanced. You learn that you heard that in your studies also. You need to be balanced by sometimes medicine and all that kind, because you are kind of absolutely, your nervous system is not able to regulate anymore. So, but when you are in a stabilized way, either in any kind of stabilized way or in a chronic phase, the only thing which you need to be able to do is write an emotional resume. I call it emotional resume because it kind of sums up all the negative experience which you know, so the upper part of the iceberg, the mind, which collected all the impressions of that trauma and still knows about it. And the summing up needs some time in preparation, which the client can do it himself. And that's the only thing which you need to do. The rest is being open, trust, feeling connected with me, and I'm also teaching that method. So I'm also having Doletiontherapy colleagues which are also working with the method. So if you are more connected to a man, for example, you look for a man who can do that. All that kind of stuff. So it really, but if you feel the connection, and if you feel that person knows his stuff, she is full of love and full of respect and full of open for any story you have, because sometimes it's also shame which keep people away from a good therapy. You know, the shame of, oh yeah, I can't tell that anyone, which you have sometimes with abuse victims, or, you know, shame is a big theme on that planet. So that's why I kind of build up in it. So I normally do a pre-talk, a pre-consultation, where we have a Zoom call online or people come to me. And so this can be the barriers. I think I addressed most of it, which are keeping people back. But when the step is done, that you know, kind of have this yes, I really want to make that deep dive. I really want to get rid of this. I really want to restart my life from a positive basis on. Then I just guide you, and I know from all the people I worked with that there is no problem anymore. It's just the first step of courage and trust, I would say.
A story that comes to mind that speaks to this, you know, when you leave a place where you are dissatisfied and go to a place where you know you want to be, you're always going to have this sort of resistance, and a story that speaks to it from the Bible is the story of Moses. You know, when the Israelites leave Egypt. Like, they're all excited and they can't wait to leave. But the moment they're out of the wilderness and they start encountering challenges, the old thoughts start creeping back into their minds. They start yearning for their life back in Egypt. They start to hear all the comforts they have, and they're like, you know, they come up with justifications for living the way they lived. Like, they start rationalizing the situation they were in. Yeah, we were slaves, but at least we weren't living in the wilderness. That was better to where we are now. And looking forward and knowing how the next day is going to be, you know, they had that comfort, like they knew what to anticipate. Like, there's all these stories that you start telling yourself because it's to deal with, you know, moving on from where you were. Like, we want to stay in the same place. Like, anytime you have any growth, there's going to be some part of you that dies. There's going to be something you let go of, something you discard, and you're going to feel lost for a certain period of time, I would imagine, because you've just left this that you knew, and you don't know what's going to come next. And like you said, it's connecting with your higher self. You don't know yet what your higher self is like. And the understanding I'm getting from the way you describe it is being led by your higher self. It's, you know, having this peace of mind that I'm on the right path and that I need to be on. Having this intuition, the faith in your intuition, that this is what you should be doing.
I'm absolutely with you. And one good thing on that the transformation phase is the the shortest you can imagine, I would say, because it's done on one day. So, and that was important and is important for me, comparing it to normal talkative psychotherapy sessions where you have like 45 minutes for each week, and you start all over with your life, and you know, like explaining something that it's also difficult for the therapist, by the way, but because you are digging in the dirt, and the mud, the dirt is kind of floating up, and you don't have the time, or not thoroughly cleaning up the water which you polluted with the digging in the dirt. So that's why I do it on a one day, which is completely blocked with the whole story of, you know, with all of it, because I didn't want to leave the client in that muddy water state. I wanted to send him home with a clear and connected, in a clear and connected state already. And because people might say that, you know, one day is very long, but when you compare it, it's just for me, and it's, you know, I wouldn't say perfectionist, but when I do something, I really want to have it as the best version as it can be. And so that was a kind of, it's also a new approach to have such a long session for one day and really solving it all. But that's my what's the word? Just a second. Anspruch. I just need to look it up. That's my claim. That's my demand on myself. That I really want to offer that the way it's the most comfortable and sufficient and efficient for my client, and that's how it works. And that, as you said, this transformation phase, it's not 40 days wandering around in the wilderness as the Egyptian did in the case of the Bible. It's just like, with me here, we are connecting with those emotions. We are transforming those emotions. And the good thing is I'm holding the energy and the space. So I'm always there. It's not a process where you're going home and wait for a week and proceed working with it, but a process where you are always kept in a peaceful and held space. And because I was experiencing that this is a very difficult phase where you transform from letting go, and the new things are not there yet. So this transformation phase can be very challenging, and that's why I wanted to reduce it in a safe space, or perform it, or offer it in a safe space.
Okay, yeah, it definitely makes sense to do the session in one day, you know, to eliminate this yearning that somebody might feel to go back to the previous state. You know, I think of it like going to the gym. A lot of people start going to the gym, they're very motivated, and, you know, it's like the world is their oyster. But over time, well, a lot of people lose motivation. And the people that see the biggest results are the people that are able to stick with it. So doing this session and taking people through that, you know, that path where they're more likely to want to go back, guiding them through that so that they are in the end state, makes a lot more sense.
Yes, and now I remember what you said before about, you know, the future expectations, and that you hold on your past. You know, when you work with me, you will start to think about time completely different. And that's one of a big relief, that you are disconnected from that narrow-minded belief that the past is always there, that the past is forming us, and that you need to have this and that future, because otherwise you won't be happy. So that you keep away from that human mind and not human spirit. You know, I'm really just distinguishing between those, the human mind kind of, and the human body also, because we are getting older and we are aging. So the human body and the human mind is kind of dependent or relating to that timeline, to time and space. But the human spirit, which we are, which we have to be reminded of, which is the much more loving source than this outer world and the news, and this is really our true source of joy and happiness. And this human spirit, or the human soul, you name it, is then not taking over, it's the wrong word, it's just being like a overall guide, making you aware of that timeline and aware that the past, you know, we cannot change the past. We cannot. It's not possible to travel by physically into the past, change something like Back to Future 1, 2, whatever part you've seen, and come back. But we can change our impressions, our effects, our how we perceived it, and we can. And when you are working with that method, you are aware that this is just a story which brought you to your awakening. At the end, it's reconnecting and awakening into the now. And as you said, Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, it sounds, you know, when you read that book, and I recommend it to you and all your listeners, it's a wonderful book. When you read that book, you think, oh, that's pretty easy. I'm just in the now. I'm just mindful in the now, da-da-da-da-da. But we have that trauma, coming back to the iceberg, we have that trauma which is dragging us back and forth on that timeline and kind of distracting us being in the now. And that's what I'm helping with. So I kind of developed the method to that book, to that living in the now, that you only can live in the now when you really resolve the past and see that as a story which brought you to that point of awakening, enlightenment, and reconnection, where you just smile and see your life as a story. And as a story, you know, which is nice to tell on a party, or but it's not you. You is your spirit. You are your spirit, and you are your purpose, which is in that spirit and not in your story, because you can be everyone and everything. When you believe in your story, you think, you know, I'm grown up in South Africa. My future expectations are much more little than mine in Germany, for example. That's a story. But with that story, you're restricting yourself. Or with people who lost their parents, they're restricting themselves, that they have like a more difficult upbringing. Fuck the hell, sorry. That doesn't matter when you realize that it's just a story. You know what I mean? And that's where I help, that we are transforming your experience. But when you still want to feel the pain, when you still want to suffer, don't come to me. When you still want to suffer, I'm not your person. I'm not your therapist or your coach. Because that's what I need. You need to be annoyed by that past. You need to be really willing to let go of the bad parts. You will keep your memory. You will remember your wedding day and the birth of your child. You will remember that. I'm not deleting memory, but I'm just deleting the negative experiences with the help of you. I'm guiding you to delete it yourself, by the way.
Yeah, you know, we all have our objective experiences. Like, you could describe everything as a storyboard. You know, our brain subconsciously remember and taking everything. But that's not what we experience. We all have our subjective experience that we live through. You know, the stories that we tell around our experiences. And that's one of the things with trauma. It's not just what happened, it's the story that is articulated around it. And, you know, story can cause quite a few problems, like with witness statements. If somebody gets mugged, there's several instances where people are absolutely oblivious to the description of the person had mugged them, but they're able to give you a very detailed description about the gun itself. Like, that's where their focus is. Like, sure, there is this that happened, but the way you look at it and interpret it is subject to each of our interpretations of it, you know? And, well, in terms of trauma and helping people overcome it, what are some techniques and approaches that you use?
Okay, so I combine visualizations with emotionally linked objects. So we create when we talk through the emotional resume, we create objects or containers who hold the energy of that. So and this is the longer part of the session is more like creating helping tools or objects who hold the energy of those specific things, so that, as you just perfectly described, that the brain is now having a new picture, which can be then connected with the old trauma, and by this connection we are reprogramming the synapses because what we do in the process, the client does destroy that object, put in boxes, and putting also an object for the subconscious mind. I'm not going into detail on that. It's all described in the website. But that to explain the destruction of this connection, or that makes it possible for the first time, makes it possible to really reconnect and reprogram the synapses. So, as coming from NLP, we all know that we all can be reprogrammed, not by someone who is wanting to influence us, or to you know what I mean, not in the bad way, but really when you have the proper help, it's really possible to change your trauma, to change your belief system. So one is that the visualizations, and the other is the more difficult to explain, the energy part behind it. So I'm a high sensitive person, and if the client I'm working with is not able to reconnect with the original emotion and really feel it, and put it on that object, I'm helping, because I connect with the nervous system of that person on that day, and I'm linking in the system, you know, like in Matrix. I'm linking in the system and be and feel all that what the person feels and experienced, and that's the major help on it. That I can guide through it, and also when it's getting too dark and too heavy, I can just say, oh, I feel we have it all. We don't need to go into detail. So it's a very trauma-friendly way, because it's not like when you do deep psychology that you really have to lay it all out again and put every puzzle, and you know, and describe every puzzle, because this can be very re-traumatizing for the patient, for major trauma, that, you know. But when I feel we have it kind of summed up, and it's going deep enough and not re-traumatizing again, then we feel it, the person feels it, and we kind of dance together through that journey. And so as I said, the combination of visualization and the energy behind it is helping the client reprogramming that and really getting rid of it. And the cool thing is about the effect, that it's really the client feels it in the moment he destroys it, and he feels the relief. And the sustainability behind it is that this relief stays. It's not like when you go out of the session, out of the appointment, then it's there again. No, it's a really sustainable way of, the next day it's still not there. It's still not there. And we have like 2 follow-up appointments. So it's kind of guiding the person into the wilderness, as you can say, like into the free flow. yeah, that was what important for me to help, but to let go also, not being responsible for my clients for all their life, but having them back on track in their own wonderful flow state story.
Yeah, it's the difference between somebody being carried along on the road versus somebody having autonomy and walking themselves. So, what are some signs? Like, how would somebody know that they have genuinely moved on and have healed and, are in their purpose?
There are certain long-term and short-term effects. So the short-term effect is really just you feel the relief. Sometimes for people it's more difficult because some people are just feeling less. So this can be also not be perceived, but that's most people say. But the middle and long-term effects are one is that you are able to be in a meta perspective of your life 24/7. So that we had that example when we talked earlier about the puppet and the puppeteer, that you see your human body puppet who is having interactions at work with your loved ones, seeing all that interactions from a higher perspective, it's called meta perspective or higher, and from that position you see absolutely much more clearer. You see the attachments, you see the triggers, and you can react from that meta perspective much clearer and much more more full of love and full of, not that you kind of the forgiving people pleaser, which you are not, which you don't have to be, but from that point of view of inner peace and you're in the middle, that you find ways out of triggering conversations, for example. And that's what I have as feedback also. So that's direct feedback that people call me and say, I was meeting my father finally, and we dealt so good with each other. I just found the right words, and I didn't feel triggered what he said, and I could see him in his grief, and I could see him in his sadness, and I didn't want to change it. I just left him where he is, and all the kind of social interactions are much easier to do the interactions. So this is one thing. And the other, so the meta perspective and the conversations.
Yeah, it sounds like, getting out of your head and just being in the moment, being present and having this faith of just being who you are. Just having this intuition, this sense that, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is who I'm supposed to be.
Yes, and since I was in research for a long time, 17 years, and had to use my mind and had to memorize things in my studies and all that kind of stuff, this is kind of the relief that it feels like a total relief of the mind that, I used to say that, you need the mind only for paying at the cashier of a supermarket to find out the right money in your pocket or to schedule a little bit. But in the moments where you really are, you are in that flow, as you said, in that you are you getting the words into your mouth, not thinking but just saying, and that's such a, I found it for myself very relieving and very full of ease to live a life like that and not hurting anyone. That's the cool thing. You are very clear, transparent, loving, friendly, but you're clear. It's a total yes to yourself without hurting others, and I love it. The I would call it the lucky factor effect is that it's probably something to do with the frequency, which can be perceived as a spiritual thing, frequency. So, but we all kind of vibrate in a different frequency. So every one of us is an individual. We are obviously clear on that, and every one of us is kind of vibrating in an individual frequency. And when we have like no resentments and no negativities in that frequency, like I always explain it with the rusty guitar. If you are a professional guitar player and have a rusty guitar, so the strings are rusty, full of rust, then you can be the best guitar player on earth, but your guitar is just not attracting listeners or admirers or audience. So what we do in the process of cleaning up the deep dive, cleaning up the negativities, we put away the rust. You put away the rust from the guitar so that you and your guitar, your frequency, is able to play finally in your best way, in your optimal frequency, in your most wonderful way you are. And by that, you are attracting coincidences or your tribe, people. You are attracting and that's why I call it the lucky factor, something which we don't know yet. We don't know the future. I don't know my future, but I know that's prosperous and fine, and that I'm going to be wonderfully okay. And with that guitar, with that newly tuned guitar and without the rust, it's opening up possibilities of, And that's what people say, I had people who finally found the right partner. I had people who finally could let go of old grief, who finally got the right job, and all that kind of stuff, because they were attracting opportunities and possibilities, which are, I know it's very spiritual what I try to explain, but it's really working, but because we are functioning like that. Our human body really does work like that. And that's for me as a scientist.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of this culture in psychology where everything needs to be well researched before it is implemented. It's where it's like we've come to accept this is what works and sort of discard everything that is deemed to not have worked. But even everything that's been researched, at one point it was not. It had to start with somebody having this irrational, somewhat illogical idea, and then deciding, okay, maybe I should try doing it this way. I mean, the whole field of psychology was founded on that premise. Like when Freud came out with his ideas and spoke about psychology, everybody thought this guy is cuckoo. Now, a lot of his ideas were debunked, but I mean, the core essence is there, that, you can't just be following scientific or like the well-researched thing. There has to be a certain point where I guess, you have to realize that some things that seem irrational or illogical is just, we don't know how to describe it yet. I mean, that's how a lot of the advertising industry works. Like, people know what works, but we don't really know why. But does that mean you're not going to do it just because you do not understand why? You do not have the necessary knowledge to understand why.
But additional to that, I'm still planning to do research on it, because when you have like worked on in the science for so long and you see the possibility with the epigenicity, which you can measure, which you can prove, so the epigenetic effects of trauma that is really stored in the genes, and that we can really change the epigenetics of, let's say, anxiety issues. And there are studies out there already who did that they, with a proper psychotherapy, could see the before and after, the epigenome before and after. And so I'm really planning to do that. I don't know how long it takes me to get the funding and all that kind of stuff, but that's what I really plan, to see the epigenome, so before the session and after the session, because I know that there will be lots of differences which you can also measure for making it accessible for people who are more rational and less spiritual, because the method itself, it's so well structured that it's actually made for rational people. And that's why I want to add that, to have the proof of the method. But I agree that sometimes it's just letting go and going into the trust that there are people that stuff does work without knowing it. And in the medicine or in the science field, it always takes like 30 years to really get a proof into society. And so like when something is proven, to really get it into the society. And I wouldn't want to wait 30 years before I would feel that ease and freedom.
Birgit, thanks for being a guest on the podcast and coming and sharing your approach of deletion therapy. I'll definitely encourage everybody, have a look at her website, linked in the description below, and she was a guest on another podcast. Give it a go if you found today's episode interesting, and yeah, follow on the socials, everything, all the works. Thank you so much again, Birgit. Have an amazing day.